In their heyday, Britain's railways were the envy of the world, carrying Victorian tourists, local produce, and vital supplies across the British Isles. But since their peak, nearly a third of the network has been abandoned. Now, 5,000 miles of lost tracks, spectacular architecture, and forgotten stories lie hidden, waiting to be explored. And there's no better way to discover them than from above. Cambridge, the ancient university city. Famed for its 800-year-old university, Cambridge got its first railway station in 1845. Situated just outside the city centre, the railways brought new life to an ancient city. Over the next few decades, more and more railway lines were built, and soon Cambridge became a railway hub. By 1862, it was possible to catch a train from here all the way to Oxford. Now abandoned, the Varsity Line, as it soon became known, connected England's two great university cities. But this is more than a connection between centres of learning. As it travelled across the country, it crossed 7 main lines, as well as passing through the major towns of Bedford, Bletchley, and Bicester on its way to Oxford. When World War II broke, this unique line, with its connection to all those main lines, really came into its own and became Britain's secret weapon. It fed the nation during wartime.
The market gardens, with the ability of access to the railways, were able to up their production and provide great support to cities that were being bombed.
Helped to crack Nazi war codes.
Most people arriving at Bletchley come on the train, most people don't have cars.
And shaped our understanding of our place in the universe.
People thought if you couldn't see it with your eyes, it didn't exist. But everything in the universe gives off radio emissions.
Abandoned for decades, some of its winding route is now slowly coming back to life.
Like many people who have been involved in this project, we're all looking forward to see the trains running.
A unique line that became Britain's information superhighway is waiting to be rediscovered from above. Amazingly, Cambridge avoided the worst horrors of World War II. Still susceptible to blackouts, but escaping the worst of the Nazi bombs. Life amongst the students at Cambridge University largely carried on as it had always done. But that wasn't the case at Cambridge Station. Trains going to Oxford would have left from platform 2 or 3. Today, used by passengers heading towards London. Packed with people, not everyone on this train would be who they appear to be. Hidden amongst the regular travellers were spies, soldiers, and policemen. Other trains travelling our now abandoned route would be packed with ammunition. Because the line intersected with major train lines, it meant that anything could be transported across the country while avoiding bomb-torn London. Soon, after pulling out of the station, signs of our abandoned line appear. Trains would have run on tracks to the right of the still existing main line to London. But today, it's not trains that call this section of the line home.
So we just left Cambridge Railway Station, heading towards the south section of the guided busway in Cambridge. It's the largest busway in the world.
Opened in 2011, the former trackbed of our line was the perfect starting point for the busway. The concrete track, built where the rails once ran, allows buses fitted with special guide wheels to travel up to 56 miles per hour.
To start with, it seems a little bit strange that you don't hold the wheel. Once it's in the track, Both guide wheels are touching the sides of the curbs each side, and you just let go of the wheel and the bus steers itself as it goes down the track, as it's doing now. Wherever the track goes, the bus will go because the guide wheels are following it. It's surprising how quick you get used to it, and before you know it, it just becomes natural.
The former line was perfect as its route avoids the congested city.
It cuts out all the traffic in Cambridge in rush hour, straight to the hospital in a matter of minutes, rather than what can take up to half an hour on the main road.
After 2 miles, the busway comes to an end at Trumpington Park and Ride. Here, our abandoned line is hard to decipher. But we can pick it up running through a new housing estate. The line continues dead straight through playing fields before reaching the River Cam. All that remains of the bridge that once carried our line over the river here are these abutments. In the 1970s, the M11 motorway was constructed, cutting across the abandoned trackbed. 7 miles down the line, we approach our first station.
This is the Lordsbridge station of the Oxford to Cambridge railway line, which opened in 1862. The station today has been extended, but it's essentially the same station, the same building from 1862. At any one time, there were 3 or 4 people on this station, even though it had very low passenger numbers and freight. There may have even been someone who did the flowers. Victorian stations in those days had lots of staff.
Today, this section of our line is home to the Mullard Radio Astronomy Observatory. Peter Doherty is a radio telescope technician who works on the site. Initially, the observatory worked alongside our line.
When we came here in 1957, the trains still ran for 10 more years, so all of the instruments were set back from the line.
During World War II, the large railway sidings surrounding Lordsbridge Station were top secret. It was used to store mustard gas, which Winston Churchill was preparing to use if the Nazis ever invaded Britain. The war amplified the development of radar and radio technology.
With radar, our ships can see through smoke, through fog, through darkness. Radar puts a finger on the unseen enemy.
After its success at spotting unseen enemies, radio technology was directed at the stars.
People thought if you couldn't see it with your eyes, it didn't exist. But everything in the universe gives off radio emissions.
Scientists have studied the skies with telescopes for centuries, but radio technology allowed them to see things not visible with the naked eye.
So we build a complete picture now, whereas once it was just optical, now it's a complete picture in many different wavelengths.
After our line closed, the trackbed was taken over by even larger telescopes. These 8 13-metre wide dishes could be moved along rails to build up a more complete picture of the universe.
They don't have to be in a direct line, but these were in a one straight line. And it's very good for looking at things a very long way away, basically. The more telescopes, the more signals.
The complex operation was controlled by scientists from this building near Lordsbridge Station.
This is the original control room for the 5K telescope that was built in 1972. There are 8 controls, 1 for each telescope. This whole complex was built as a contained unit where people could come and work and even sometimes stay late into the night or all night. This control room is now no longer used. The only thing active now is a wind speed on the roof. And this whole telescope now can be controlled from a single computer or from a laptop. This is no longer used now, sadly.
Just 1 year before our line closed, this site made a significant scientific discovery.
They found pulsars, which was the greatest radio astronomy discovery of the 20th century. A pulsar is a star at the end of its life, giving off pulses like a lighthouse as it goes around. They've found several thousand of them now in our galaxy, but the very first one was found by Tony Huish and Jocelyn Bell in the late 1960s. And that's how they got their Nobel Prize, which was the first ever one for radio astronomy.
Yet, despite making the initial discovery, 24-year-old Jocelyn Bell's name wasn't on the Nobel Prize. Instead, it was awarded to her supervisor, Anthony Huish.
And no, Jocelyn wasn't on it, but she's never complained. She's still alive now. She's a fantastic speaker, great lady. You could argue all day whether or not she should have been on it. Most people think she should.
Scientists today can no longer catch the train here, but the site as a whole continues to undertake cutting-edge research that is transforming knowledge of our universe.
These telescopes are more or less continuously working, and there's a lot of work done on the cosmic microwave background, CMB, which is the relic of the Big Bang.
Continuing our journey towards Oxford, our line rises above the surrounding countryside on an embankment near the village of Bourne. From above, the impressive earthworks are hidden by trees, but their scale is revealed on the ground. Purchased by Cambridgeshire County Council, our abandoned line has been transformed into a nature reserve. The former trackbed has become a haven for butterflies, insects, and native trees. Either side, wetlands have been created. The whistle of steam trains may have been replaced by the chirping of birds, but visitors are left in no doubt as to the reserve's history. This old railway wagon was placed here when the reserve opened, for visitors to stop and reflect on what used to be. It's just one of many secrets dotted along this lost line. For over 100 years, trains pass through the wide-open Cambridgeshire countryside, heading towards the university city of Oxford. Our journey began in Cambridge. Branching off the main line to London, our route took a direct path out of the city and towards its first station, Lord's Bridge, now home to a radio observatory. From here, it pushes onwards towards Oxford. 5.5 miles later, this lost line forms the boundary of Hayley Wood. From above, it's clear how the track provides the only straight edge for the trees. This ancient woodland can be traced back to the Domesday Book and is still a wildlife haven. Even the trackbed of our line has become home to wildflowers in the spring. From here, trains on our abandoned line began a gentle descent. The industry and academia of the start of the journey is left behind in favour of rolling fields. Our next station is Gamlingay. Opened in 1862, it served a tiny rural community. Its huge sidings, now replaced by this industrial estate, were originally built for a nearby brickworks, but during World War II they were used as an ammunition store, away from German bombers. With the heart of the village less than a mile away, it's lucky that the sidings were never attacked. A few miles from our abandoned line is Shuttleworth House. This house's framework was built from steel girders, similar to the ones on our lost line, and partly paid for with money made on the railways. By the height of our line's popularity, the estate was home to a shining light of the English gentry.
Richard Shuttleworth was very popular with most of the local people. He was very nice, I think. He got on with people well.
Janet Rose is a guide at Shuttleworth House. The family who lived here produced more than one type of hero during the war.
Richard was the only son of Dorothy and Frank Shuttleworth. He loved mechanical things, and he liked horses and dogs as well. But he absolutely loved anything that went fast.
Richard's great early love was cars. He took part in several early motor races in the UK, including the Brighton Speed Trials and Brooklands Mountain Climb. His greatest success came when he won the Donington Grand Prix in 1935.
He was at the cutting edge of racing. He was doing really well at it, but he gave up motor racing after a bad accident and took up flying instead. It's ironic that the accident that killed him was involving flying a plane. During the First World War, some of the family's factories had been turned over to producing planes for the war effort. As a result, there was Sopwith Camels here on site.
Introduced in 1917, Sopwith Camels soon became the iconic fighter plane of World War I. In the hands of skilled pilots from across the Commonwealth, Sopwith Camels downed more enemy aircraft than any other fighter plane. Richard soon became enamored with fixing and restoring the old planes. It wasn't long before he started collecting any plane he could get his hands on. When the Second World War broke out, he saw an opportunity to fly for his country. But things went horribly wrong.
Richard was involved with the RAF, and he was flying at night and crashed into the side of one of the hills in Oxfordshire. When Dorothy was struck with grief, losing her son, it was at the beginning of the Second World War, which is a time when so many families were losing people.
Despite losing her son, Dorothy wanted to channel her grief into something helpful. She turned her home over to the war effort.
This photograph was taken in the 1940s with convalescent soldiers, and there were beds all the way along the wall here. Of course, the table wasn't here, and the carpet was taken up, but the portraits remain on the wall just as they are in the photograph. And Dorothy Shuttleworth did help. She donned the uniform and she did help with looking after the wounded soldiers. It's good that she was able to make something positive come from her grief.
Dorothy didn't just help wounded servicemen, she wanted to preserve the memory of her son.
She kept the planes together in the collection in memory of him.
Richard's collection has been slowly expanded over time, and today contains hundreds of planes from the earliest days of flight to World War II. One of the jewels in the collection is the Blackburn Type D. Built in Leeds in 1912, it is the oldest airworthy British aeroplane.
As far as aircraft museums go, Shuttleworth collection is completely unique because it is the only collection where so many planes come out and fly.
Soon, we approach the first of the main lines that our route crosses, the East Coast Main Line between London and Edinburgh. From above, our abandoned route is visible through the trees as it runs alongside the high-speed route. Arriving into Sandy, our line had a separate station, which today has been replaced with a car park. Passengers would have alighted here to change to the East Coast Main Line. This interconnectivity is what made our line so important during World War II. It allowed for travel all around the country, whilst avoiding blitz-torn London. Leaving the station behind, our line slowly climbs before curving round and crossing the East Coast Main Line on a bridge. From above, the abandoned route is visible as an access road. 2 miles later, we approach Blenheim. Hidden amongst this housing estate is the remains of Blenheim Station. Opened in 1862, its platforms were so low that often passengers had to use stairs to alight their carriage. This rural station boomed during the war years, but not with passengers.
This part of Bedfordshire is the market garden for London, which was opened up by the railways in the late 1850s, which meant the produce could get quickly to London and also open new markets to the north and south.
Simon Biscoe and Jenny Osborne run Hillside Market Garden. They're keen to keep the farming traditions of this area alive.
So we grow a wide range of vegetables, and we grow things from salad to spinach, carrots, parsnips, beetroot, leeks, spring onions, tomatoes and cucumbers in our polytunnels. We both really enjoy growing vegetables and produce, and wanted to do something that made people enjoy seasonality again and flavour, because you don't often get that.
Bedfordshire's market gardens trace their origins back to the 17th century.
Predominantly, they started off as sort of families growing their own food, and then it became more of an enterprise where people were growing on a bigger scale. The railway would send the vegetables to London, and in return, the empty trains would bring back the horse manure and the soot that would then be spread on the fields. Between 1886 and 1906, the area and amount of produce produced in Bedfordshire pretty much quadrupled.
Already important to keeping Britain fed, Bedfordshire's market gardens became even more important during World War II.
The market gardens, with the ability of access to the railways, were able to up their production and provide great support to cities that were being bombed.
In 1940, with Nazi U-boats attacking imports into the country, the government launched the Dig for Victory campaign. It hoped to make Britain as self-sufficient as possible.
It was a really successful campaign that was started by the agricultural minister to turn as much land in people's gardens into allotments. It was nationwide.
The campaign was so successful that parts of Kensington Gardens in London were transformed into market gardens, and allotments were created at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle.
Some could say the blueprint for the Dig for Victory was based around small market gardens that were found in Bedfordshire, so that provided some foundation for taking that countrywide.
Up until the war, 75% of food was imported, and after the war that turned into 75% being grown within the country, which was quite phenomenal, really.
After the war, farms in Bedfordshire grew larger and more mechanised, but market gardens are returning.
I think there is a wonderful revival of market gardens. There's a trend going forward now of people going back to this growing, wanting to know where their food is from. And I think it's a really exciting thing to bring back to an area that was, at one point really rich and full of market gardens.
For generations, a railway connected Oxford and Cambridge. Affectionately known as the Brain Line, it rose to special significance during World War II. Our journey began in Cambridge. As we travelled towards Oxford, our train crossed the East Coast Main Line at Sandy and stopped in Blenheim to pick up fresh vegetables for hungry Londoners. From here, we push on through the heart of Bedfordshire. Approaching Bedford, our line once again finds itself alongside the River Great Ouse. It crossed the river on a series of bridges, remarkably still in fine condition decades after the last train used them. Today, these bridges are a vital walking connection between the Bedford River Valley and Priory Country Parks. Even from above, very little of our old line is visible as we pass through the outskirts of Bedford, its lost route hidden amongst dense greenery. However, right in the heart of the city is a remarkable survivor. Amongst these trees are the remains of the original Bedford St John's station. Opened in 1846, this was a key stop on the line from Oxford to Cambridge. As we pull out of the old station, we join a part of our line that never closed. From here until Oxford, our line isn't entirely abandoned. For the next 16 miles, the line survived closure after fierce protests. Today, commuter trains still run from Bedford to Bletchley on the Marsden Vale line. With the line between Bletchley and Bicester slowly being rebuilt as part of a £7 billion mega project, passengers will soon once again be able to ride the Varsity Line into Oxford. 5 miles later, we arrive at Stuartby, a station that owes its existence to this. Stuartby Brickworks was once the largest brickworks in the world. It once had the world's biggest kiln and produced 500 million bricks per year. The bricks produced here helped rebuild Britain after the devastation of World War II. At its height, the factory had its own swimming pool, emergency services, and even a photography studio. After operating for over 100 years, in 2008, the brickworks closed after struggling to meet emission standards. Its iconic chimneys, long a landmark of our line, were pulled down in 2021. It's been left abandoned ever since, a relic of our lost line. "11 miles later, we arrive into Bletchley. The station was always an important connection between our line and the West Coast Main Line. But it became all the more important during World War II.
The Bletchley train station has a close association, of course, with Bletchley Park. It's where many people who worked in code breaking arrived for the first time, and the way that many of them get to work on a daily basis.
Thomas Cheetham is the curator at Bletchley Park, which was home to the World War II Codebreakers. Many of Britain's greatest minds worked here, recruited from Oxford and Cambridge universities.
It's certainly a benefit from staff coming from Oxford and Cambridge that they can get the train easily here on the Varsity Line. Most people arriving at Bletchley come on the train, most people don't have cars, and they're either given directions up to the park or they're instructed to ring a particular phone number and then they're picked up and driven round the corner. But we don't know of any secret signals which were given, and we also don't know of any secret tunnels from the station up to Bletchley Park.
The grounds of Bletchley Park were soon filled with temporary huts, built for the codebreakers to do their work from. By the end of the war, there were over 20 of them, as well as several more permanent buildings. Some of Bletchley Park's most famous work happened here, in Hut 8.
Hut 8 was the section dedicated to breaking the German naval Enigma machine. The naval Enigma is the hardest to crack because of the cybersecurity procedures of the German Navy, and that's the problem that Alan Turing chooses to tackle when he arrives at Bletchley Park in 1939. Code breaking isn't really his main job in his life. It's temporary wartime work, but he does it very, very effectively.
The German Enigma machine was used to communicate top-secret messages. It generated daily ciphers, which were used to scramble messages. cracking this code was something Britain was very keen to do. But it wasn't that easy.
The number of different cipher settings produced by an Enigma machine and all its components is about 103,000 million, which is about 240,000 times the number of seconds that have elapsed since the beginning of the universe.
To help crack the code, Turing designed a machine known as a bomb, which was able to crack codes faster than any human could.
The bomb machine can take your guess at what a German message says, and it can sort of reverse engineer the cipher and work out how the cipher was constructed in the first place. There are certain words and phrases that reappear in messages, and the codebreakers get to know these patterns.
These repeated phrases were the weakness that allowed the Nazi codes to be cracked.
Within about 18 months, his team in Hut 8 are reading the German ciphers regularly, and this is really important information helping Britain fight the naval war and particularly secure its supply routes across the Atlantic.
Although Alan Turing is its most famous codebreaker, at its peak, nearly 10,000 people worked at Bletchley Park. 75% of them were women.
They used to run the machinery, they used to run the communications, do a lot of the everyday code-breaking tasks that have been chopped into small pieces, and eventually this place is really run like a production line. The term we like to use is an intelligence factory.
Alan Turing was given an OBE in 1945 for his wartime services and developed some of the first computers. Today, he is known for being the founder of modern computing, as well as his tragic death in 1954 after being convicted of gross indecency because of his homosexuality. Bletchley Park was closed in 1987, but its legacy still lives on to this day. The work done here was the foundation of modern intelligence services, computing, and encryption.
Back then, codes and ciphers were something that the government dealt with, and normal people just didn't encounter. Nowadays, we're all using encryption every single day. From a modern cybersecurity point of view, Bletchley Park has some really important lessons to teach us about how the human being in every system is always the weakest part.
For most of its life, our line used these platforms at Bletchley. But in the 1960s, a huge concrete flyover was built as part of a plan to modernise the line. Today, Bletchley Station is being transformed. In 2020, the flyover was pulled down and rebuilt, complete with a brand new high-level station. It's part of a £7 billion project to bring our line back to life. Five miles later, track work continues as our line passes Horwood House. The estate dates back to the 18th century, although this house was built in 1911. It's here that some trains would have picked up very unusual royal cargo. The estate was home to a herd of Jersey cows who provided dairy products directly to Queen Victoria via our line. As we follow our route onwards towards Oxford, brand new rails have taken over the trackbed. Just a few short years ago, this section of the line was totally abandoned, with twisted tracks and flooded cuttings. Now, everywhere you look, is evidence of the line coming back to life. For the last 2 years, engineers have been rebuilding Winslow Station.
When I walked through here before we started work, I was up to my knees in water along with my colleagues that we were walking through, and it was hard to believe that we could create a railway as you can see today.
Jez Baldock is the Deputy Director of East West Rail Alliance, who are reconstructing this part of our line.
So as we started our project, we encountered some of the old track that was left behind, interwoven into the new growth and vegetation that had sprung up throughout the route. So that was one of our first tasks, to remove all of the existing infrastructure.
Around a mile back up the line was the original Winslow Station. but the engineers found it wasn't suitable.
That was built 1st of May 1850, and at that time Winslow had approximately 2,000 people living here. Now it's over 3 times that. So we've been constructing Winslow Station since 2022, and we're very near completion now. Around 6 months' time, we will see this station being fully complete and constructed. Well, as you can see, the station is nearing completion now. We've got some of the final fittings to be done on the station, the customer information services, the screens, so you know when your train is coming and that it's on time, of course. To my right, we have the main station building. There's facilities for cyclists and walkers. We're trying to encourage sustainable transport on this railway. And then you access through the station building, over the footbridges, using 2 lifts down onto the platforms. So once the station is open, it will look very similar to what we have here. It'll be clear of all the construction equipment, of course, but on this side of the platform, you'll be waiting for trains that go to Bicester, to Islip, to Oxford in the west. And on the other platform, you'll be looking to get trains to Milton Keynes and Bletchley, and then in the future on to Bedford and Cambridge.
When trains do run on these new rails, it will be a big day for Jez and his team.
Like many people who have been involved in this project, we're all looking forward to see the trains running, as are the local residents here at Winslow, so they can use services to Oxford and Cambridge and beyond. And yeah, I hope to be on that first train.
For over 100 years, the Varsity Line linked Cambridge and Oxford, providing a vital cross-country connection, as well as being a secret weapon during World War II. Our journey began in the university city of Cambridge. We crossed the East Coast Main Line at Sandy before dropping off Codebreakers at Bletchley. Our journey now continues onwards through Bicester to Oxford. Just under 30 miles from Oxford, this section of our abandoned line is being prepared for reopening. As we follow the newly laid rails, we suddenly meet the huge sweeping curve of another lost line. Along this overgrown embankment used to run the Metropolitan Railway, now known as the Metropolitan Line of the London Underground. For over 30 years, steam-powered tube trains would travel the 50 miles from central London to connect with our line at the tiny station of Verney Junction. The station was famously rural, initially built in the middle of a field and accessible only via a dirt track. It soon grew to be the largest station on this part of our lost line. From here, passengers could travel not only to London, but also north towards Banbury. In the early days of World War II, freight trains would leave our line here and use the Metropolitan Line as a backdoor into London. Despite the key role our line played during World War II, authorities were at a loss as to what to do with it during peacetime. In the 1950s, a plan was drawn up to turn the entire line into a freight superhighway, which bypassed London. Eventually, the idea was scrapped, and persistent losses meant that the majority of the route was shut in 1968. Finally, 75 miles after leaving Cambridge, we approach Oxford. But there's one final abandoned relic of our line to be revealed. Barely visible beside the busy main line is the Rewley Road swing bridge. It was built to carry our old line over the Sheepwash Canal as it approached its final destination. Designed by famed railway engineer Robert Stevenson, this swing bridge is considered to be one of only 2 movable bridges on the River Thames, the other being London's Tower Bridge. The 22-metre-long bridge weighs 85 tonnes and would take 5 minutes to be hand-cranked open. Abandoned for 40 years, its rusty remains were in serious danger of being lost forever. The Oxford Preservation Trust took it apart piece by piece, with every element cleaned and restored. After crossing this bridge, our train would terminate, but not at the Oxford station passengers know today. Next door to Oxford's current station was a second, Rewley Road.
A station like this would have been full of people with expectations. There were places for meetings, for goodbyes. All of life could be seen within a building such as this.
Rewley Road station closed after 100 years, with services for our line transferring to Oxford Station.
It had a bit of a mixed history after that. It was used, I think, as a hostel, and then it was used as a tyre depot. But no real long-term use was found for it.
Roland Gillett is a volunteer at the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre.
When you go to Oxford now, there's just one main station. You may wonder, why was there a need for two? It was the way it was then in terms of rivalry between the different railways.
Our line was built by Robert Stevenson. A few years later, right next door, Isambard Kingdom Brunel built what's now Central Oxford's only railway station.
So there was rivalry between the two as to which gauge would be the most successful, which would survive. In the event, it was standard gauge which won.
Built in 1851, this station has a connection to one of Victorian Britain's most famous buildings.
This station used elements that were originally used in the Crystal Palace, the building which was erected for the Great Exhibition.
The Crystal Palace was a wonder of the age. 3 times the size of St Paul's Cathedral, it was constructed in just 39 weeks using a modular construction method.
And the railway, which saw this, said, "I really like that. We would like to have the benefit of something like that for our railway station." And so the Great Exhibition opened on the 1st of May, 1851, and Rewley Road Station opened on the 20th of May, 1851.
In 1999, Oxford University bought the station site and began searching for a new home for the abandoned station. After a short search, it was decided its new home would be the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre.
So dismantling of Rewley Road Station started in Oxford at the beginning of January 1999. And then essentially it was a 3-year project between then and the time when it was completed. Rewley Road Station, in its original form, would have been very similar to the Rewley Road that we see now. As far as possible, materials were restored. When they came on site, great trouble was taken to restore what could be restored.
Today, the station is a visitor centre and a monument to our lost line.
The Varsity Line has had a wonderful history, joining 2 university cities together. It was sad that for a while it was no longer available. But now, with the new line restarting, it's a really exciting opportunity for the future.
The Varsity Line connected southern England together. As well as the communities it passed through, it tied together 7 main lines, creating a connected network. During World War II, the line came into its own as a secret weapon, which allowed for spies, troops and arms to be sent all across the country and to the front line. It played a vital but underappreciated role in the victory. The line's closure in the 1960s was emblematic of how the country saw its trains. Cars were the future, and railways would be stripped back to the bare necessities. The rebuilding of the Varsity Line 60 years later hopes not only to revitalise the areas around the route, but return us to the idea of a Victorian train network without London at its heart.